I watched the Empress take her last breath, and I did nothing. The imperial physicians surrounded her bed like vultures, their expensive robes rustling as they frantically mixed herbs and chanted prayers that meant nothing. The crown prince knelt beside his mother, his face a mask of anguish, his hand clutching hers as the life drained from her eyes. And I, the renowned physician who had saved her life countless times before, stood in the shadows of the chamber, my medicine box closed, my hands perfectly still. Lady Physician Chen, one of the senior physicians, called desperately, "Please, you must try the silver needle technique. You're the only one who—" "I cannot," I said softly, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "The poison has spread too far. There is nothing to be done." It was a lie. I had the antidote in my box. I had prepared it 3 days ago when I first noticed the symptoms. I knew exactly what poison the second prince had used, the same rare compound that had killed me in my previous life. The Empress's eyes found mine in her final moments. There was no accusation there, only understanding. Somehow, she knew. She had always been too perceptive, too kind. In my first life, she had been the only member of the imperial family who had treated me as more than a useful tool. She had been my greatest advocate, my protector against the machinations of the court. And in my first life, I had saved her. I had discovered the second prince's poisoning plot and administered the antidote in time. The Empress had lived. She had been so grateful that she insisted I become the crown prince's personal physician, guaranteeing me a position of unprecedented power and wealth. For 5 glorious years, I had served at the highest levels of the palace, my skills celebrated throughout the empire, until my stepsister arrived. May had always been father's favorite, the legitimate daughter, while I was merely the product of his affair with a servant. When father became Minister of Revenue and gained influence at court, May demanded to join the palace as a lady-in-waiting. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly ruthless. Within months, she had seduced the crown prince, convinced him that I was secretly in love with him and dangerous in my jealousy, and orchestrated my downfall. The crown prince, besotted and manipulated, had believed every lie. When a plague broke out in the southern provinces, he sent me there as punishment for my inappropriate feelings, knowing it was a death sentence. I had caught the plague and died alone, delirious and abandoned, while May married the crown prince and became crown princess. But the heavens had given me a second chance. I had woken up in my 20-year-old body 5 years before my death with all my memories intact. I had been reborn on the exact day I first entered the palace to treat the Empress's mysterious illness. For weeks, I had agonized over what to do, save the Empress. Again and repeat my fate? Or change the path entirely? The decision crystallized when I caught May sneaking into father's study, reading his private correspondence about my rising status at the palace. I saw the jealousy in her eyes, the same calculating look that had preceded my destruction in my first life. I realized then that as long as the Empress lived and protected me, May would always find a way to turn the crown prince against me. The Empress's kindness made me valuable, which made me a threat to May's ambitions. But if the Empress died from the second prince's poison, everything would change. The second prince, weak and vicious, would be exposed as a murderer. The crown prince, devastated by his mother's death, would need an ally, someone who understood his pain, who had witnessed his mother's final moments, and most importantly, someone who could help him claim the throne by destroying his brother. I would give him that revenge. And in return, he would give me the power to destroy May before she ever had the chance to destroy me. So I had let the Empress die. Now, as her final breath rattled in her chest, I saw the crown prince's face transform. The grief was genuine, but beneath it, I recognized something else. Cold, calculating fury. His eyes found the second prince standing in the doorway, his face arranged in false concern, and I saw the exact moment the crown prince understood the truth. "Brother," the second prince said, his voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "I came as soon as I heard Mother was—" "Get out!" The crown prince's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out before I forget you're my brother." The second prince paled and fled. The crown prince turned to me, his eyes red but focused. "Lady Chen, you knew, didn't you? You knew she was poisoned." I met his gaze steadily. Yes, Your Highness. Why didn't you save her? Because, I said carefully, saving her would not have saved you. The poison came from within the palace. As long as your mother lived, her murderer would try again and again until they succeeded in a way that couldn't be traced. I paused. But now we know exactly who is responsible. Now we can act. It was a calculated risk, revealing my knowledge, but I had gambled that the Crown Prince's rage would overcome his grief, that his desire for justice would align with my need for protection. I had gambled correctly. Tell me everything, he said. The history of my suffering began long before I entered the palace. I was born Chen Lian, bastard daughter of Chen Wei, a minor official who had an affair with one of his wife's servants. My mother died giving birth to me, and Madame Chen, my father's legitimate wife, made sure I never forgot my shameful origins. I was raised in the servants' quarters, given just enough food and education to survive, but never enough to thrive. May, 3 years my junior, was the treasured daughter. Beautiful, accomplished, doted upon by both parents. She had the finest clothes, the best tutors, every opportunity. I had hand-me-downs and whatever scraps of knowledge I could steal by listening at doorways, but I had one gift that May lacked: an almost supernatural talent for medicine. I discovered it by accident when I was 8 years old. One of the older servants collapsed in the kitchen, clutching his chest. Everyone panicked, but I felt a strange certainty wash over me. I knew, somehow just knew, that he needed willow bark tea and slow, steady pressure on a specific point below his ribs. I made the tea and applied the pressure, and he recovered. The other servants whispered that I had magic hands, that the gods had blessed me. Madame Chen heard the whispers and tried to beat the witchcraft out of me. But father, pragmatic above all, saw opportunity. If his bastard daughter had a valuable skill, why not use it? He arranged for me to apprentice with the local physician, old Dr. Sun, under the condition that I would treat the family for free and never reveal my parentage to anyone important. I spent the next 12 years studying obsessively. Medicine became my escape, my purpose, my proof that I was worth something, despite my birth. Dr. Sun, who had no children of his own, taught me everything: herbalism, acupuncture, surgery, diagnostics, likes. I read every medical text I could find, experimented with new combinations of herbs, developed techniques that even my teacher hadn't seen. By the time I was 20, I was the most skilled physician in the province. People traveled from neighboring cities to seek my treatment. My reputation grew, and with it, father's status. He was promoted from minor official to assistant minister of revenue, largely because his family physician had saved the life of the provincial governor's wife. That's when the summons came. The Empress herself had fallen mysteriously ill, and the imperial physicians were baffled. Word of my abilities had reached the capital. The emperor requested my presence at the palace immediately. Father was ecstatic. Madame Chen was furious. And May looked at me with barely concealed hatred as I packed my meager belongings for the journey. "Don't get comfortable at the palace," she hissed when we were alone. "You're still just a bastard playing dress-up. The moment you embarrass father, you'll be back in the servants' quarters where you belong." I had ignored her then, too excited by the opportunity to care about her jealousy. What a fool I had been. In my first life, I had arrived at the palace with hope and determination. I had diagnosed the Empress within hours. She was being slowly poisoned by mercury in her cosmetics, a plot by the second prince's maternal family to weaken the crown prince's position. I had treated her, saved her life, and earned her eternal gratitude. The Empress, impressed by my skill and touched by my humble origins, had taken me under her wing. She gave me apartments in the palace, fine clothes, a generous salary. She made me the crown prince's personal physician and introduced me to influential nobles. For the first time in my life, I was respected, valued, even celebrated. I had been so happy, so naive. I had failed to notice May's arrival at the palace 2 years later, arranged by father, who was now Minister of Revenue. I had failed to see how May immediately set her sights on the crown prince, how she manipulated every interaction to seem coincidental and charming. I had failed to recognize the signs of the crown prince's growing infatuation until it was too late. and I had definitely failed to anticipate how thoroughly May would poison the crown prince against me. She had been brilliant, I admitted grudgingly. She never criticized me directly. Instead, she expressed concern. Lady Chen seems so devoted to you, Your Highness. I hope her feelings are purely professional. She created situations where I would be alone with the crown prince at inappropriate times, then ensured others witnessed it. She forged letters in my handwriting declaring desperate love. She paid servants to spread rumors about my obsession. The crown prince, honorable and somewhat sheltered, had been horrified. To him, I had transformed from trusted physician to dangerous stalker. When he confronted me, I had been so shocked by the accusations that my denials sounded hollow. My very confusion seemed like manipulation. The Empress had tried to defend me, but even she had seemed uncertain. The evidence was too comprehensive, too damning. When the Southern Plague broke out, the Crown Prince had volunteered me for the medical mission with barely concealed relief. The Empress had tried to object, but the Emperor himself had approved the assignment. I was sent south with minimal supplies and no protection. I had died knowing that May had won. She would marry the Crown Prince, become Empress, and live the glorious life that should have been mine. But I had been reborn, and this time I understood the game. This time, when I arrived at the palace, I diagnosed the Empress's mercury poisoning, but I also discovered something else. Evidence that the second prince's maternal family had been systematically poisoning the Empress for months. I treated the symptoms just enough to ease her pain, but not enough to save her. I waited and I watched. 3 days ago, the second prince had made his final move. He replaced the Empress's regular cosmetics with ones containing a lethal dose of pure mercury and arsenic. The combination was designed to kill quickly while mimicking a natural seizure. The imperial physicians would be baffled. No one would suspect poison. Except me. I had prepared the antidote immediately, and then I had locked it in my medicine box and made my choice. Now, standing in the Crown Prince's private study while the Empress's body was prepared for burial, I laid out everything I knew. The poison was administered through cosmetics, I explained, spreading documents across his desk. Mercury and arsenic in combination? The delivery method was sophisticated. The mercury was mixed with lead powder to enhance absorption through the skin. This isn't the work of an amateur. The Crown Prince studied the documents with fierce concentration. You said you knew who was responsible. Your brother had means, motive, and opportunity. But more importantly, I pulled out another document. I have proof. This is a record of purchases made by a servant in the second prince's household. 30 taels of mercury, 20 taels of arsenic. Both purchased from a merchant who specializes in rare compounds. How did you obtain this? I had obtained it by remembering which servant the second prince had used in my previous life, then bribing the merchant to check his records, but I couldn't explain that. I have sources, people who owe me favors for medical treatment. I've been collecting information about potential threats to the imperial family since I arrived at the palace. It's why I was watching your mother so carefully. It was a plausible lie. The Crown Prince nodded slowly. If this is true, we must bring this evidence to father immediately. No. My sharp tone surprised us both. I softened it quickly. Your Highness, forgive my presumption, but consider the situation carefully. Your brother's maternal family is powerful. The Duke of Lin commands 3 armies. If you accuse the second prince directly, it becomes a political crisis. Your father might be forced to show mercy to avoid civil war. The Crown Prince's jaw clenched. So my mother's murderer goes free? I didn't say that. I said we must be clever. I leaned forward. Your Highness, your brother killed your mother to weaken your claim to the throne. He wants to create chaos, to make your father doubt your stability. If you act rashly now, you play into his hands. But if you wait, if you gather more evidence and build stronger alliances, you can destroy him completely. Not just punish him, destroy his entire faction so thoroughly that they can never threaten you again. You're suggesting a conspiracy. I'm suggesting justice. Real justice, not political theater. I met his eyes. Your mother deserves that. And you deserve to take the throne without your brother's shadow hanging over you. There was a long silence. Finally, the crown prince asked, "What would this plan require?" "Time, patience, and trust." I hesitated. "Your Highness, I must be honest with you. In the coming months, people will try to turn you against me. There are those at court who see me as an outsider, a commoner who has risen too high. They will spread rumors, forge evidence, attempt to discredit me. If we are to work together to bring down your brother, I need to know that you won't believe their lies." This was my gambit. I was inoculating him against May's future manipulations by framing them as predictable political attacks. If I could make him see me as a target of conspiracy rather than a potential stalker, May's schemes would backfire. The crown prince studied me for a long moment. "Lady Chen, you let my mother die. I understand your reasoning, but that doesn't erase the fact that you could have saved her and chose not to. You made that choice for political calculation. Why should I trust that you won't betray me the same way?" The question was fair. I had anticipated it. "Because, Your Highness, I am a bastard daughter with no family connections, no political power, and no protection beyond my medical skills. If I betray you, I lose everything and die. But if I help you become emperor, I gain a grateful sovereign who can shield me from those who hate me for my origins. My self-interest and your success are perfectly aligned. I am, quite literally, betting my life on your victory." The brutal honesty seemed to satisfy him. "Very well, we have an alliance. What happens next?" "Next," I said, allowing myself a small smile, "we begin gathering evidence, and we wait for your brother to make mistakes. Murderers always do, eventually." What I didn't say was that I already knew every mistake the second prince would make. I had lived through this period once before, after all. I knew which servants he would bribe, which nobles he would approach for support, which plots he would attempt. I was playing a game where I had read the ending while everyone else was still on the first chapter, and I knew something else too. In approximately 6 weeks, father would bring May to the palace to serve as a lady-in-waiting. She would meet the crown prince at the Moon Festival celebration. In my first life, that meeting had begun my downfall. This time, I would ensure that May's arrival marked the beginning of hers. The turning point came exactly as I had planned it. 6 weeks after the Empress's death, I had become the crown prince's most trusted advisor. We met daily in his study, ostensibly to discuss his mother's case, but increasingly to talk about political strategy, court dynamics, and his future as emperor. I was careful to remain professional, keeping our relationship clearly within the bounds of advisor and prince. I provided valuable intelligence, demonstrated competence, and never overstepped. The crown prince, isolated in his grief and paranoid about his brother's intentions, came to rely on me. I was the only person in the palace he trusted completely, the only one who understood the full scope of the conspiracy against him. I had used those weeks well. Through my network of grateful patients, servants, minor officials, merchants who owed me their lives or the lives of their loved ones, I had gathered damning evidence against the second prince, records of bribes, testimony from servants who had delivered poison, letters outlining plans to destabilize the crown prince's faction. I built a case so comprehensive that no one could deny it, but I held back from presenting it to the emperor. The timing wasn't right. The second prince's maternal family was still too powerful, too entrenched. We needed to weaken them first, turn other noble families against them. It was a delicate game of political chess, and I was playing it perfectly. Then the Moon Festival arrived, and with it, my stepsister. I was standing beside the crown prince on the palace terrace, overlooking the festival celebrations in the gardens below when I saw her. May, dressed in an exquisite silk hanfu embroidered with silver phoenixes, her hair adorned with jade pins, her face painted to perfection, she was laughing with a group of young ladies in waiting, the picture of grace and charm. I felt the crown prince notice her. Of course he did. May had been crafted by the heavens to attract male attention. I forced myself to remain calm, to show no reaction. "Who is that?" the crown prince asked casually. "That is Lady Chen Mei," one of his attendants answered, "the daughter of Minister Chen. She has recently joined the palace as a lady-in-waiting to honor the late Empress's memory." The irony of May honoring the Empress would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. I knew what was supposed to happen next. In my first life, the crown prince had approached May at the festival, struck up a conversation, and been instantly charmed. Within weeks, they were meeting regularly. Within months, she had him completely under her spell. But this time, I had a plan. Your Highness, I said quietly, I must speak with you privately. It's urgent. The Crown Prince, trained by weeks of conspiracy to take my concerns seriously, excused himself from the terrace. We retreated to a private garden pavilion, far from listening ears. What is it? He asked. My stepsister has arrived at the palace. I let real bitterness color my voice. I need to warn you about her before she causes damage. The Crown Prince frowned. Your stepsister? Lady Chen Mei is your sister? Stepsister. We share a father, but nothing else. I took a deep breath, as if steeling myself to reveal something painful. Your Highness, I know how this will sound. I know it appears jealous and petty. But I need to tell you that Mei is dangerous. She is manipulative, calculating, and utterly ruthless. She destroyed my mother's reputation, convinced father to treat me as less than human, and has spent her entire life sabotaging anyone who threatens her position. The Crown Prince's expression shifted to something cautious. These are serious accusations against your own family member. I know, and I wouldn't make them lightly. I met his eyes. Your Highness, you once asked why you should trust me. Let me prove my loyalty now. I predict that Mei will approach you within the week. She will engineer a seemingly coincidental meeting. She will be charming, sympathetic about your mother's death, and interested in your thoughts on governance and justice. She will seem perfect. And you believe this is manipulation? I know it is, because I've seen her do it 100 times. She identifies powerful men, studies their interests and vulnerabilities, and crafts a personality designed to appeal to them specifically. I paused. Your Highness, I'm not telling you to avoid her. That would be suspicious and would make me seem like a jealous woman. I'm asking you to watch her, test her, see if she behaves exactly as I predict. If I'm wrong, I'll accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate for slandering a lady of the court. It was a bold move, but a calculated one. By framing Mei's future actions as my predictions, rather than my paranoid accusations, I made the Crown Prince a participant in uncovering her deception. He would be looking for evidence of manipulation rather than falling victim to it. The Crown Prince considered this. Very well. I'll observe Lady Chen Mei and see if she behaves as you predict. But Lady Chen, his voice grew stern, if this is truly just sisterly jealousy, our alliance ends immediately. I won't have petty family squabbles interfering with our work. Understood, Your Highness. Over the next 3 days, everything happened exactly as I had said it would. Mei accidentally encountered the Crown Prince in the palace gardens. She expressed sympathy for his loss, mentioning how her own mother had died when she was young. A complete lie. Madame Chen was alive and well. She asked intelligent questions about his vision for the empire's future. She was demure but not weak, intelligent but not threatening, beautiful but seemingly unaware of it. She was perfect, and the Crown Prince watched it all with increasing suspicion. On the 4th day, he summoned me to his study. You were right, he said without preamble. Every single thing you predicted came true, even down to her mentioning a dead mother to create sympathy. I nodded. Mei researches her targets thoroughly. She knew you had just lost your mother. Of course she would create a similar loss in her own backstory. How did you know she would do that? Because I had seen her do exactly that to you before. Because I've watched her manipulate dozens of men the same way. She has a formula. Identify their pain, mirror it, become their comfort. The Crown Prince sat back in his chair, studying me. Your prediction has earned you credibility. So tell me, what is her ultimate goal? Why target me? Power. Mei wants to be Empress. She has no magical abilities, no special talents, no real virtues. But she is beautiful and cunning, and she understands that marrying you is the fastest path from minor noble daughter to ultimate power. I leaned forward. Your Highness, she will eventually try to discredit me. She sees me as competition, not for your romantic affection, but for your trust and ear. She'll attempt to convince you that I'm dangerous, that I have inappropriate feelings for you, that I'm manipulating you for my own gain. I already been warned about this, the Crown Prince said dryly. You told me people would try to turn me against you. Yes, but May will be subtle about it. She won't criticize me directly. She'll express concern. She'll create situations that make me look suspicious. She'll forge evidence if she needs to. I met his eyes. I'm telling you this now so that when it happens, and it will happen, you'll recognize it for what it is. And what should I do about her? This was the moment I had been waiting for. Use her. Let her think she's succeeding. String her along. Make her believe you're falling for her act. Let her grow confident and careless. She'll reveal information about father's faction, about the nobles who support the second prince. She'll become a valuable source of intelligence while thinking she's seducing you. The Crown Prince smiled slowly. That's remarkably ruthless, Lady Chen. She destroyed my life once, Your Highness. Turnabout is fair play. Once? How could she have destroyed your life once? I froze. The slip had been unintentional, a careless reference to my previous life. I recovered quickly. A figure of speech, Your Highness. She destroyed my childhood, my relationship with my father, my chance at a normal life. It felt like dying. He accepted this, but I made a note to be more careful with my words. Over the following weeks, the Crown Prince played his role perfectly. He allowed May to believe she was winning him over. They took walks in the garden. He asked her opinion on poetry and music. He smiled at her jokes. Meanwhile, he reported every conversation to me, and I helped him craft responses that would encourage her to reveal more about the political landscape. May, confident in her beauty and skills, fell for it completely. She began mentioning private conversations from father's household, noble families that were wavering in their support for the Crown Prince, rumors about the second prince's growing military strength. Every piece of information was valuable, and the Crown Prince used it to shore up his own position. But May was also building her case against me. I noticed her paying servants to follow me. I caught her rifling through my chambers once when I returned unexpectedly. I intercepted a forged letter, supposedly written by me to the Crown Prince, declaring my undying love. She was following the exact same playbook as in my previous life. The difference was that this time, the Crown Prince was expecting it. When May finally showed him the evidence of my inappropriate feelings, the forged letters, the servant testimony, the reports of me watching him obsessively, he pretended to be shocked and disturbed. He told May he would handle the situation. She left his study smiling, confident she had won. Then he summoned me and showed me everything. Your prediction was accurate. She's trying to destroy you exactly as you said she would. I examined the forged letters with clinicals, detachment. They were good, desperate and emotional, written in a hand that closely mimicked mine. If the Crown Prince hadn't been forewarned, he might have believed them. What will you do, Your Highness? Nothing, for now. Let her think she's succeeded. But Lady Chen, he hesitated. I need to ask. Is there any truth to her accusations? Do you have feelings for me? The question was fair. I answered honestly. No, Your Highness, I respect you immensely. I admire your strength and your commitment to justice. But I have no romantic feelings for you. My dedication to your cause is entirely political and professional. And if I asked you to pretend to be in love with me? I blinked. I'm sorry? May is working hard to convince me that you're obsessed with me. What if we used that? What if we let her think she successfully exposed your feelings, and then you confessed to me in a controlled way? She would believe she won, and she would grow careless. She might reveal who else is working with her. It was brilliant and terrifying. Your Highness, such a deception could easily backfire. Yes, but you said we needed to be clever. This is clever. He was right. I nodded slowly. Very well. How should we proceed? Over the next 2 weeks, we staged my exposure and confession. The Crown Prince pretended to confront me about the letters. I acted devastated, tearful, and admitted to having developed feelings I knew were inappropriate. He, playing the role of honorable prince, told me gently but firmly that such feelings could never be reciprocated, and that I should take time away from the palace to recover my composure. May watched it all with barely concealed glee. She reported everything to father, who was simultaneously proud of his legitimate daughter's success and disappointed in his bastard's shame. But I didn't leave the palace. Instead, I moved into a smaller, more discreet set of chambers and continued working with the crown prince in secret. To the court, I was a disgraced physician, quietly staying on to fulfill my medical duties but no longer holding any political influence. In reality, I was more essential than ever. And while May celebrated her victory, I put the final pieces of my plan into place. The climax came 4 months after the Empress's death. By this time, I had gathered enough evidence against the second prince to bury him 10 times over. Records of poison purchases, testimony from servants, letters outlining his conspiracy. Most damning of all, I had obtained a confession from the merchant who had sold him the arsenic and mercury. The man dying of lung disease was grateful for the pain relief I provided and willing to testify in exchange for medicine for his family. But I had also gathered something else, evidence of May's own crimes. May, growing confident in her position as the crown prince's favored companion, had started making mistakes. She had been indiscreet in her letters to father. She had bribed servants with traceable funds. Most foolishly, she had started her own conspiracy. May had approached several noble families, suggesting that if the crown prince became emperor, she would be empress, and they could enjoy special favor. She was essentially selling political appointments before she had any authority to give them. It was a form of fraud and corruption that the emperor would never tolerate. I documented everything. I also discovered something that made me smile coldly. May had been meeting secretly with the second prince. She was hedging her bets, maintaining contact with both brothers in case the second prince somehow took the throne instead. These meetings were deeply inappropriate and would be seen as treasonous. On the night of the Autumn Moon Festival, 4 months after the Empress's death, the Crown Prince requested an emergency audience with the Emperor. He brought me with him, along with 3 chests full of evidence. The Emperor, aged and exhausted by the political tensions between his sons, received us in his private study. The second prince was also summoned. Father, as Minister of Revenue, was called as well. And May, because the Crown Prince specifically requested her presence as a witness. "Your Majesty," the Crown Prince said, kneeling formally, "I have evidence of a conspiracy to murder my mother, the late Empress." The room went deathly silent. The second prince's face went white. Father looked confused. May's eyes darted to me, finally recognizing the trap. For the next 2 hours, the Crown Prince presented his case. Documents were examined, servants were questioned. The dying merchant gave his testimony via written statement. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The second prince tried to deflect, to blame servants, to claim he was framed, but the crown prince had anticipated every argument. For every denial, there were 3 pieces of corroborating evidence. The emperor, his face carved from stone, listened to it all. When the presentation finished, he asked one question. "Who helped you compile this evidence?" "Lady Chen Lian, Your Majesty," the crown prince said. "She has served as my investigator and advisor since my mother's death." The emperor turned to me. "Lady Chen, you are the physician who failed to save my wife." "Yes, Your Majesty." I knelt, my head bowed. I carry that shame every day. I knew she was poisoned, but by the time I discovered the source, the damage was too extensive. I have dedicated every moment since to finding her killer and bringing him to justice. It was a more flattering version of the truth, but not technically a lie. The emperor studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have served the crown prince well." He turned to the second prince. "My son, you are guilty of matricide. The evidence is clear. You will be stripped of all titles and ranks. You will be exiled to the southern wastes, never to return to the capital. Your maternal family will be investigated for their role in this conspiracy. If they are found complicit, they too will face punishment." The second prince collapsed, weeping. His life was over. In a culture where family name and status were everything, exile was a fate worse than death. But the emperor wasn't finished. He turned to father. "Minister Chen, your daughter has served the crown prince admirably. I am pleased by her loyalty and competence." Then his eyes found May. However, your other daughter is a different matter. May's face went pale. Your Majesty? Lady Chen Mei, the Emperor said coldly. Evidence has been presented to me of your meetings with the second prince. Meetings held in secret discussing matters of succession and political favor. You have been conspiring with my son's enemies. No, Your Majesty, Silence. The Emperor's voice cracked like a whip. You sought to manipulate my son, the Crown Prince, for your own advancement. You spread lies about Lady Chen Lian, attempting to isolate my son from competent advisors. You promised political favors you had no authority to grant, committing fraud against noble families. He leaned forward. You are a schemer and a liar. You are banished from the palace. You will return to your father's house and will not be permitted to serve at court again. Furthermore, your father's reputation is damaged by your behavior. Minister Chen, you are demoted to assistant minister. Consider it a mercy. Father looked like he might faint. May burst into tears, prostrating herself, begging for mercy. But the Emperor was unmoved. Guards escorted them both from the study. As they left, May's eyes met mine. For just a moment, she understood. She saw the trap I had built, the revenge I had taken, the justice I had crafted. Her expression transformed from shock to pure hatred. But it didn't matter. She had lost, completely and utterly. After Father and May were gone, the Emperor turned to the Crown Prince. My son, you have proven yourself capable and wise. You uncovered a conspiracy, gathered evidence, and pursued justice with patience and strategy. These are the qualities of a good ruler. Thank you, Father, the Crown Prince said quietly. I am old and tired. The burden of empire weighs heavily upon me. The Emperor paused. I believe it is time to name you Crown Prince officially and begin your transition to taking the throne. Within the year, I will abdicate in your favor. The Crown Prince looked genuinely shocked. This was happening faster than either of us had anticipated. But he recovered quickly, bowing deeply. I will serve the Empire with every breath, Your Majesty. The Emperor nodded, then turned to me once more. Lady Chen Lian, you have proven yourself invaluable to my son. What reward would you ask for your service? This was the moment I had been working toward for 4 months. I kowtowed deeply. Your Majesty, I ask only for the opportunity to continue serving the crown. Prince as his personal physician. I need no titles, no land, no wealth. Only the chance to use my skills in service of the Empire. It was a humble request on the surface, but the Emperor understood the deeper meaning. By asking to remain the Crown Prince's personal physician, I was asking for permanent protection, for guaranteed proximity to power, for security that no one could challenge. The Emperor smiled slightly. Granted. Furthermore, you are elevated to the rank of Lady Physician, 3rd grade. You will have apartments in the palace, a generous stipend, and the authority to treat members of the imperial family as you see fit. He paused. And Lady Chen, your father's demotion means his household status is reduced. You need not return to his authority. You are now a ward of the court, under the Crown Prince's protection. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of fear and anger I had carried for 20 years. I was free, truly free. Father had no power over me. May couldn't touch me. I was under the direct protection of the future emperor. Thank you, Your Majesty, I whispered. I will serve with absolute loyalty. The epilogue of my revenge stretched over the next 18 months, and it was everything I had dreamed. The second prince was exiled as promised. His maternal family, the powerful Duke of Lin, was investigated and found complicit in the poisoning plot. The Duke himself was executed for treason. His armies were redistributed to commanders loyal to the Crown Prince. The entire faction that had threatened the Crown Prince's succession was dismantled with ruthless efficiency. Father, demoted and humiliated, returned to his estate with May. I heard through palace gossip that Madame Chen blamed May for the family's disgrace, and their household was now filled with bitter arguments and recriminations. Father, always a social climber, found himself shunned by the very nobles he had spent years courting. His career was over. May, banished from court, had no prospects for marriage. What nobleman would want a woman associated with conspiracy and exile? I heard she grew bitter and angry, her beauty fading as her hopes died. Sometimes I wondered if she suspected I had been reborn, if she recognized the perfection of my revenge. But it didn't matter. She had no way to harm me now. The crown prince became emperor 1 year after his mother's death, just as his father had promised. The coronation was magnificent, a week of celebrations throughout the capital, declarations of a new era of justice and prosperity. I stood in the crowd during the coronation ceremony, wearing the robes of a lady physician, 3rd grade. I watched the crown prince, now emperor, receive the imperial seal and knew that I had shaped this moment. Without my knowledge from my previous life, without my calculated decision to let the Empress die, none of this would have happened. The second prince might have eventually succeeded in a different plot. The crown prince might have been manipulated and destroyed by May. Instead, I had changed fate itself. After the coronation, the new emperor summoned me to the palace for a private audience. We met in the same study where we had first formed our alliance, surrounded by the same documents and evidence that had brought down his enemies. Lady Chen, he said, we have achieved everything we set out to do. My brother is exiled, his faction is destroyed. I am emperor, and you are the most respected physician in the empire. We have been fortunate, Your Majesty. Fortunate? He laughed. Lady Chen, you orchestrated this entire chain of events. You saw the conspiracy when no one else did. You built the case against my brother. You exposed your stepsister's schemes. You even predicted exactly how our enemies would move against us. He studied me with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Sometimes I wonder if you can see the future. My heart stopped for a moment, but his tone was light, joking. He didn't really believe it. I smiled. Not the future, Your Majesty, just human nature. People are predictable when you understand their motivations. Perhaps. He leaned back. Regardless, I owe you everything. You let my mother die. Yes, I know that's what you did, but you did it to save me. To give me the tools and evidence I needed to protect myself and claim my throne. That's a debt I can never fully repay. You've already repaid it by giving me freedom and protection, Your Majesty. Perhaps, but I want to offer more. Lady Chen, I want you to become my imperial physician. Not just my personal doctor, but the head of the Imperial Medical Bureau. You would oversee all physicians in the palace, set policy for imperial health, and have authority over medical matters throughout the empire. It's a position of tremendous power and influence. I was stunned. The imperial physician was traditionally a man from an established medical family, someone with decades of experience and political connections. Offering it to me, a 22-year-old woman, a bastard of questionable birth, was revolutionary. Your Majesty, such an appointment would be controversial. I'm the emperor. I can be as controversial as I want. He smiled. Besides, you've proven yourself 10 times over. Anyone who questions your competence can take it up with me directly. I bowed deeply, feeling genuine gratitude. Then I accept with honor, Your Majesty. I will serve the empire with every skill I possess. Over the next few months, I took up my new position and transformed the Imperial Medical Bureau. I implemented new training standards for physicians, established a system for distributing medical care to rural areas, and created a poison detection protocol for the imperial household that would prevent anyone from ever poisoning a member of the imperial family again. I also continued treating the emperor personally. He came to rely on me not just as a physician, but as an advisor. We spoke regularly about politics, justice, the balance between mercy and strength. I helped him navigate the complex web of court politics, identifying threats before they could materialize. In my previous life, I had died alone and abandoned, a victim of manipulation and jealousy. I had been powerless, overlooked, destroyed by someone I should have been able to trust. In this life, I had become one of the most powerful people in the empire. I had the emperor's ear, the court's respect, and enemies who feared me. I had carved out a position of such essential importance that no one could remove me without destroying themselves. Sometimes I thought about the Empress, about the choice I had made to let her die. The guilt never fully faded. She had been kind to me, protective, maternal, in a way my own stepmother never was. Letting her die had been necessary, but it had not been easy. I visited her tomb regularly, bringing offerings and incense. I told her spirit about the justice I had won, about the second prince's exile and the defeat of his conspirators. I told her that her son was a good emperor, that he ruled with wisdom and strength. I hoped she would understand why I had made the choice I did. I hoped she would forgive me. 1 year after the coronation, on the anniversary of the Empress's death, the emperor joined me at her tomb. We stood in silence for a long time, both of us remembering. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Letting her die?" I considered lying, but the emperor deserved honesty. "Every day, but I would make the same choice again if I had to." "So would I," he said, and my mother was the kindest person I ever knew. But her death gave me the chance to destroy my enemies completely. If she had lived, the second prince would have tried again. More people would have died. The empire might have fallen into civil war. He paused. Sometimes terrible choices lead to better outcomes. "Your mother would be proud of you," I said. "You've become a great emperor. And you've become a formidable advisor." He turned to me with a slight smile. "My council keeps suggesting I should marry soon. They present me with lists of eligible noble daughters, each one more tedious than the last. They all want to be empress, but none of them want to actually govern." I laughed softly. "Marriage is a political necessity for an emperor, Your Majesty. You'll need an heir." "I know, but I think I'll wait a bit longer. I'm in no hurry to tie myself to some vapid noblewoman who sees me as a crown rather than a person." He glanced at me. "You understand what I mean. You've seen how people change when they want something from you." I understood perfectly. In my previous life, I had been invisible until I became useful. In this life, I was respected, but also watched, measured, evaluated constantly by people trying to determine if I could be used or manipulated. Power changes everything, I agreed, but it's better than powerlessness. Indeed. The emperor was quiet for a moment. "Lady Chen, I want you to know that as long as I rule, you will have a place at court. No one will be permitted to harm you or threaten your position. You have my word on that." It was more than a promise. It was a guarantee of lifetime protection, the kind of security I had never imagined having. I bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more to me than you can know." We left the tomb together, returning to the palace where our separate duties awaited. As I walked through the halls, passing servants who bowed respectfully and nobles who greeted me with careful courtesy, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. I thought about May, trapped in father's estate, her dreams of being empress destroyed forever. I thought about the second prince, suffering in exile, his power and status stripped away. I thought about father, demoted and humiliated, forced to watch his legitimate daughter's disgrace. And I thought about myself, no longer a powerless bastard, but the imperial physician, advisor to the emperor, one of the most influential people in the empire. I had let the empress die. I had manipulated events and people to serve my revenge. I had been ruthless, calculating, and willing to make terrible choices to achieve my goals, and I had won. Sometimes at night, when I was alone in my chambers, I wondered about the nature of justice and revenge. I had told myself that I was pursuing justice for the Empress's murder, that I was protecting the crown prince from his brother's conspiracy. These things were true, but they were also convenient justifications for my own desire for vengeance against May and father. Was I a hero or a villain? Had I saved the empire or simply used a national crisis to settle personal scores? I didn't have an answer. Perhaps I was both. Perhaps everyone was both in their own way. The world was not divided neatly into good and evil, innocent and guilty. We were all making choices with incomplete information, trying to survive and thrive in a complex and often cruel world. What I did know was this: I would never be powerless again. I would never be overlooked, underestimated, or destroyed by people who thought I was beneath them. I had fought my way to the top using every advantage I possessed: my intelligence, my skills, and yes, the impossible gift of foreknowledge from my previous life. And I had no intention of giving up that position. Ever. 5 years after the emperor's coronation, I stood in the Imperial Medical Bureau training a new generation of physicians. My students came from all backgrounds, nobles and commoners, men and women, legitimate children and bastards like I had been. I taught them medicine, of course, but I also taught them something else. That skill and competence were their own form of power. That knowledge could elevate even the lowest born person to positions of influence. The emperor, now in his 30s, had still not married. The court whispered about it constantly, speculating about why he remained single when heirs were so important to the dynasty. I knew why, though we never discussed it explicitly. He had seen firsthand how marriage could be weaponized, how a charming spouse could manipulate and destroy. He was cautious, careful, unwilling to give anyone that kind of power over him. I understood. I would never marry either. I had built a life of independence and influence without needing a husband. Why would I ever surrender that? Sometimes I saw father at court functions. He was a minor official again, invited out of courtesy to the Minister of Revenue's position he had once held, but wielding no real power. He looked older, diminished, haunted by the disgrace May had brought upon the family. He avoided me, unable to meet my eyes. Good. I never saw May again. She had disappeared into obscurity, her life the cautionary tale she deserved. I didn't need to know the details of her suffering. Knowing she had lost everything while I had gained everything was satisfaction enough. On quiet evenings, I still visited the Empress's tomb. I still brought offerings and incense. I still felt the weight of the choice I had made to let her die. But I also felt the pride of knowing that her death had not been meaningless. It had saved her son, saved the empire, and given me the justice I deserved. Thank you, I whispered to her spirit one evening as the sun set behind the imperial tomb. Thank you for being kind to me in both lives. I hope you understand why I did what I did. I hope you can forgive me. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of incense and autumn leaves. It wasn't an answer, but it was enough. The Empress had been wise and perceptive in life. Her spirit, I believed, understood the complexities of the choices I had made. I returned to the palace as darkness fell, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. I was the imperial physician, the emperor's most trusted advisor, a woman who had died and been reborn with the knowledge to change her fate. And I would spend the rest of my life ensuring that no one could ever take that away from me again.